And look at that, the magic of technology.
We defeated your firewall.
Very good. I think it's good evening for you, Craig. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. We'll see if we can get Radek on the call as well, but let's get started with the event. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. Folks on the call, we appreciate your patience as we work through the technology difficulties, but I have the distinct pleasure of joining the team from Deloitte on a really interesting look into GenAI and maximizing GenAI for contract value. They put together a white paper, a thought leadership white paper that we just thought was fantastic. So we wanted to partner with them. Craig, looking forward to the conversation. You want to do I guess I should introduce myself first. Name is Troy Wright. I manage the partner ecosystem for Ironclad. Super excited to have you, Craig. You want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, and very sorry, everyone, that I was late here. Actually, it's funny. We're talking about centers of excellence today. I'm actually in a center of excellence, but I'm not being particularly excellent with my Wi-Fi. So I'm Craig Conti, partner in Deloitte Legal. I run our contracts practice in the UK as well as globally. And this is really looking at how end-to-end contracting, both from a process standpoint, technology standpoint, and resourcing standpoint. So this is so GenAI in contracting and centers of excellence really hits a lot of my sweet spots.
Great, thanks for joining us. I'm just going to get to it. So the white paper you authored, I thought was a really interesting look into not just current, but the future of contracting and that center of excellence. You want to talk to the audience about your how you went about doing the white paper and the kind of some of the inputs that you had into this, or is it mostly just from historical client work? Talk a little bit about how you came up with the findings.
So it's a mix of client work, I think, really, just experience. So actually, Radek Kowalski is joining me here as well. Hey. Sorry about that. It's a very collaborative paper, I would say. No, but I think really the history of how we did this is based upon our own experience working with clients, but also, we go to lots of events. We talk to partners such as yourself. We talk to others out there. So really to start seeing, particularly right now, it's a moment in time. It's probably been a moment in time for a little while, with GenAI, what people are seeing, what people are doing, what people are testing out on this, and what kind of really works. I know, Radek, if you want to introduce yourself and say.
Hey, Radek Kowalski, leading Center of Excellence in Krakow in contracts practice with Craig.
We got there.
And you guys are calling in from Poland, I think, today. Is that correct?
We're in lovely Krakow, Poland, which is beautiful and sunny today. And normally has incredible technology, but for whatever reason, our computers just didn't want to comply. But don't hold that against us.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. So you want to talk a little bit about this evolving landscape of contracting, where it's been, where you see it going, and some of the challenges and the opportunities that it presents itself?
Yeah, for sure. I think, look, we're in a very interesting moment in time in the world, right? And some of these points here, I won't belabor them here, but we're dealing with a lot of change. And I think you go back to some votes that whether it's the UK leaving the European Union, COVID, massive inflation, and sadly some geopolitical stuff going on out there too in terms of wars. I think we've had a lot of once in a lifetime events that affect contracting, affect supply chains out there. So I think this is really interesting in terms of the regulatory landscape that's out there, just the reality of how complicated it is right now in terms of what's going on. So that's some of the themes that we really saw coming out there. The first. The second, though, I think is there's a need now, particularly as we sit here in 2025, it's about value. I think efficiency is a great thing. I think and quality are sort of table stakes. But really, what is the value of the contracting? Like, we did a report with World CC about this as well. What is the purpose of the contract? If it's just some paper, that's not really going to cut it in 2025. What's the business value that you're generating from this relationship and the contract itself? Maybe Radek, you want to?
Yeah, I think that also one of the things in this changing environment is how the COVID can Craig elaborated on that, changed the approach to technology. Before, the legal departments were actually resistant from any technical change or transformations. Now we see speedy implementations of different tools. They are eager to learn how the new technologies are working. They are asking how generative AI can help expedite their processes, where they can use that, how the Center of Excellence models are working, what is the value of the contracts that they can drive out of that. So those are the changes which we are constantly discussing with our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about contracting, where we've been around efficiency and risk, and those are still there. However, if you can look at the contract as the center of commerce, what can we gather from that intelligence within there? I think that's a radical change from where we've been to where we can be in this new environment. But just totally agree with the points there. The change is constant. There is value within those contracts that we need to extract. And then, of course, always that complexity and risk. I think those are really good highlights.
Yeah, I think also too the value of getting this right. So it's not it's not a negative thing. I mean, there's lots of changes, whether it's regulations, or other things going on in the world. But I mean, if you're a company, and we see a lot of companies out there as well, that like if they get this right, if they're ahead of the game, if they have intelligent contracts and able to get that data out quickly, then they're managing their risks, and they're making the most of it. It's a competitive advantage to be on the front foot here. So I think it's an exciting time.
And it's not only about, from my perspective, just proactive risk management, but also intelligent decision-making process. With access to the information that now the organizations are looking forward to have, and embedding generative AI into that, you can really get a good insights and guide your contract strategy, risk management, negotiation strategies, optimizing outcomes, looking forward for different roles for the organization as well. And this information sits within the contractual information. This is how we can now approach that through the GenAI as well.
That is great. Well, audience, keep your questions coming. We want this to be value to you. So we're here for you, and keep those questions coming. I'm going to keep rolling through this and keep kind of thinking through the analysis of the white paper, but also to glean some knowledge from you, Craig and Radek, about specifically GenAI. So
yeah,
any thoughts about GenAI and what it is doing to this center of excellence in this contracting space?
Well, I think so just for everyone knows what we're talking about here. I think centers of excellence. Obviously, we're here, and this could be shared services that you have in your own company. It can be an outsourced, provider. It can be a number of things. But I think consolidating the activities and professionalizing it in a lot of ways. I mean, there's studies out there that like up to 60% of a company touches contracts in some way. And most of that's side of desk, but it actually sort of like bringing this together, whether it's a virtual center or an actual center, but it's having a number of people all together focused on this is amazing. Now, the GenAI thing is also, adding that extra layer to it, because one of the things you actually see in the market there is like, well, GenAI is super available. There's lots of all sorts of free ones or very cheap ones to be using out there, but a lot of people are using it for sometimes parlor tricks, writing the school papers. Write this in the format of, Will Ferrell, right? They're doing sort of silly things with it. But if you actually want to get like your company to adopt it and to actually use it in sort of a targeted way in the contracting space, whether it's, the analytics component of it, moving data around, answer the question, oh, this happened last night. What does our contract say about it? Having a center of excellence that's already in the adoption, that understands the prompts, that understands how to use it, and is sort of incentivized to use it, as opposed to just hoping for the goodwill of your company to adopt it, is a real competitive advantage.
And if I may add to that, from my perspective, centers of excellence are the great place to start the journey with generative AI, because those are already prepared with the standardized processes, standardized approach, access to the data. And for generative AI, the data is the key. We need the data, the standardized set of information to go through the process, to learn how we can use it, but also then to drive value to the organization. And this is all where the COEs are already working on. And this is the great place where we can test the new things. So this is one thing. The other thing is that COEs typically work very closely with the business. They are not just oriented on cooperating with one function, but they are supporting the whole organization, which is why quite often they have this approach of not just following the process for execution, but actually solving the case. And this is where they can see the potential of application of GenAI in their day-to-day activities. They are the first ones to identify the use cases for testing and then spreading that across organization. This is how I see the future as well.
And I'll build on the build, right? But like we put on some things here too. I think a number of social media platforms have absolutely ruined our attention span. I'm amazed you guys are even watching this now. Like it's so what that's also done is like our speed to value. So like saying the idea that like, well, we're going to do this and we're going to wait 6 months and we'll see some ROI potentially in Q4 of this year. No one's buying that. Like everyone has become incredibly impatient and wants to see like, well, now I've done this, how fast can it happen? Now, the very interesting thing about this is that when you see a GenAI that could generate a contract or generate a template in seconds, that just feeds the beast, right? You want to see that value coming. So whether it's installing a platform with GenAI or getting your data together and using the GenAI, that's sort of that impatience that we have in our private lives that come into our business lives as well.
And this is also when we have these good examples of the industry-specific approach. Historically, the first organizations to test the technology were probably the banking and the pharma, because this is highly regulated space and they need to apply to all the regulations in different locations, be compliant with the audit requirements and so on. And this is now also where we see that those organizations are testing the new approach with generative AI, but not only for compliance with the requirements. The case which we are discussing with our clients is, for example, about the legal watch. If generative AI is present in the present time everywhere, can we check what legislation is coming in? Can we test our contracts if those are ready to apply to this legislation? If that is the case, what would be the new wording, right? And generative AI can already test that and give you the first draft of the change that you would have to implement. So it's going beyond the typical model.
Did that answer?
Yes, there was a question that came in around oversight in GenAI, and how do we apply oversight to GenAI that meets the requirements of the business? Any thoughts there?
The best practice is just believe the GenAI. Don't even look at it. Just take all its hallucinations and no, I'm teasing. So I mean, like I think I kind of always make this joke. I'll let Rags sort of talk about it more as well. Is that what GenAI does simplistically is it gives information to you fast and at your fingertips. But remember, it's giving it to your fingertips, which still need to be connected to arms, which need to be connected to a brain to actually do something. So I think having that oversight and having that natural inquisitiveness. Does that sound right? Is this the right thing? You still need human in the loop. I think having the right governance in there is.
And I second that, because from my experience, I would also say that this is one of the functions that will be sitting within the COEs. Given their approach to standardization, given their sensitiveness about compliance with legal requirements, I think that this will be one of the functions which will be built to really test if the responses that are coming through GenAI are standardized, are compliant with our internal regulations, are compliant with GDPR and so on. So this is one thing. And also, just building on that, then will be probably the piece about the innovation and experimenting. Because if we notice that there is a space for improvement, probably COEs will drive this change in the organization as well.
I think there's something that Ironclad has adopted with our AI approach, which is show your work. Instead of being a black box, is show how you came to that and use referenced sources and what have you. So we think that just having a black box is not the right answer. Showing the work is important.
Yeah, I think that's and that's why I think a lot of companies are going to sort of those like the LLMs that are sort of closed into an environment. So if I know the data set of what I'm looking at, right? If I'm taking all my procurement contracts, both by then I take my sales contracts as well. I'm going to match those two up to make sure my flow down's there. Very difficult, very wonky thing to do, but something you need to do. Otherwise, you have price risk. GenAI can do that, and the good thing about it is that you can test that. Right, exactly as you're saying. Show your work. Show me how I matched up my 5 supply chain contracts that feed into this one product that I sell, so I know I'm actually doing it correctly. I think it's always risky. Nothing against the internet, love it, but if you open it up too much, you can get some of the weird solutions. So I think knowing what that you're actually taking it from like your own data set, a clean data set, mind you, right? That I think that's a good idea. I think what you guys are doing on Ironclad is a very good idea as well.
Taking it from reference sources and not allowing like some of the more open kinds of AIs to go out and grab a blog that is an opinion, not a source. That's something we've been working on and making sure that it's referenced sources, not opinion sources.
Yeah, now if they're taken from airport vlogs, that's totally fine though.
All right, we had another question.
Cool.
From GenAI models, how effective are the models when applied in a regulatory environment that are constantly evolving? And I think this is kind of ties into what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Rex starts shaking his head.
I think that this is going back to our discussion just a second ago about the data quality and interoperability standards, because we can compare the data that is coming in from the market. The question is what we are going to compare that against, and how accurate that response from the tool will be. I personally would not trust this kind of a source, but still, this is a good starting point for having your opinion about certain texts and certain regulations and searching for applicable options.
Yeah.
But I would build on that. I would not.
And like a real life example of this is like, it depends on the laws, right? And the classic lawyer answer. But so GDPR, been around for a long time. We have very good standards and very good understanding of what a data processor is and the data owner is, in the EU outside of it. So referencing and using GenAI to sort of match your contract to that makes sense. It's pretty standard. I know Rack's not 100% believe me, but the opposite would be DORA. So Digital Operational Resilience Act, from last year, brand new law. So it hadn't been necessarily enforced yet. No one's seen any of the real full regulations on it. So when we tested some of the different Gen AIs out there on it, they would be okay. Could they match a contract up to it? Could they issue spot? Absolutely. Junior lawyer can issue spot too. But could they give a consistent interpretation of the contract? Can it take 1,000 contracts at once and compare it to DORA? Not really, because they'd probably be like 70, 80% correct. And it's not the Gen AI's fault necessarily. It's just we don't, the regulation is so new that the actual what the interpretation of it is going to be, it isn't really necessarily settled business yet. Issue spotting, good. Extraction, great. Opinion, not so much.
Yeah, exactly right. I wanted to pivot a minute to this idea of center of excellence. For those that have not really started the center of excellence or have a immature center of excellence, any thoughts for the folks in the audience where to get started and what are some of the most critical pieces to put in place?
Yeah, so I think the key thing to this, it's going to sound boring, but it actually works, right, is just setting standards. So whether or not whether it's a virtual one or you're opening your company already has a center in country X and you want to start to put everyone there together, or otherwise, right? Just making sure that everyone's singing from the same sheet music, that the contract stand for exactly this. This is how we do this. What is our playbook? What is our template? What's the red lines? What are the red risks? Just having those simple things documented, because a center works, through discipline and repeatability in a lot of ways, and bringing that knowledge together. If you don't have that, then you're just a group of smart people hanging out together.
Yeah, applying on the content versus process as well, right? So the Center of Excellence already gives you the ability to standardize the processes that you have in the organization. Raise a question why Craig always needs to sign the contract. Is it really the case? Maybe we can lower the threshold, and given the volume of the documents that we are going through, the negotiations, maybe we can reduce the threshold for the signature and just expedite it. And those are the questions that are typically being raised when we are moving the services to COEs. Then build on that. If you are looking for application of technology, like a CLM tool where you can embed all of this information as your starting point, you will have to do that anyway. So starting small with processes, with content, adding technology to that, then generative AI as well. I think that this is the good starting point.
That's great. And as you're building that center of excellence and specifically integrating GenAI into your discipline, there was a question around how do you define that higher value work, and how do you bring in those, or what are the most critical skills that you need to develop in your people, manage and governing the GenAI and the Center of Excellence? Any thoughts around the types of folks and the type of skills that are required for that type of work?
Yeah. One thing I'll kick off, I'll hand it to you about this closer to your heart. I think if you're building a center of excellence now or getting a team together and you're not thinking about Gen AI in the mix, you're missing a trick. Because I think, alternative forms of delivery or, standardization of things, if you're not having the Gen AI discussion of testing out where you're going to do it, if you're only doing a little bit of it, you're missing a trick. Because I think in 2025, I guarantee your competition is thinking of it, right? They're already doing. So I think delivery, COE, and Gen AI, those ideas have to be all interwoven, because otherwise you're just going to run into challenges later on. Now, in terms of the people, I think it depends. I guess it depends on the skills of what you want to do.
It depends on the skills that what you want to do. But from my perspective, this evolution goes in a way that we will not need that many of the certified people. We will not need that many lawyers for contracting centers of excellence, more business-oriented people, commercial lawyers who are understanding what is the end goal, who can cooperate with the business, and open-minded, right? I have the example of my daughter who actually does not have a day without using generative AI. She asks most of the questions through the GenAI tools. For me, it's still about checking something. So if we would like to have this model moving forward, these people have to be open-minded and already technology savvy and getting used to use the generative AI in their day-to-day operations, so they can spot the things that we can add to our model, which is supported by GenAI. And those are the things that they should be looking for. They should raise the question, why am I doing that? GenAI can do it. And then the Center of Excellence is a great field to test that. If that model will work through the Center of Excellence, we can deploy that in the wider organization. But after the testing and spotting the things, we can already measure what is the efficiency, and we can do it in a safe environment of the Center of Excellence. So this is why I think this is very valuable. This is why I think the skill set will change. Not just the lawyers who will repeat the same model, but in a different location and in a more standardized way, but actually will question the approach. Well, I think that we are not looking forward to have a tech-enabled lawyer, but legal-enabled technology. And those are the guys who will tell us what enablement do they need in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, and just throw it out there, we just oversimplified a bit. Like Thomas Friedman, great writer, in the 20th century, and I know some of you were alive back then too. We measured intelligence as your ability to remember things. Exams and all were just basically, could you name dates? Could you do this? Could you name theorems, etc. There. What we've seen now, right? In 2025, what you're existing into is intelligence isn't just the ability to sort of regurgitate information, because we all sit around with something with more computing power than NASA in the 1960s in our pocket. Mm-hmm. So we, the ability to find information is great. So I think actually what you'll see intelligence now is the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, the ability to challenge. Mm-hmm. And as we're going back to all that change that's going to happen, that change is it's not going to slow down, guys. Sorry, the ability to sort of be flexible with that and move in those environments, because GenAI, even the term GenAI has only been around for a couple of years. Like what we're going to be like in 5 years from now is going to be very interesting.
One of the recent questions which I had, if we can test something within the COE, was the scenario planning. So given the maturity of generative AI, can we simulate various negotiation scenarios, then predict the outcome, and actually get ready for the negotiations in the long term with the long-term objectives? And this is something that, well, is forthcoming. It's not just improving the existing things, but searching for new options.
There was a question that came in from Matt around providing employees access to AI. How do you strike that balance between empowering the employees and maintaining appropriate oversight? Any thoughts on the balance there?
Well, I think you have to serve, most of your your document suite from a very large company near Seattle that provides to you, has AI in it, right? You probably don't realize how much AI you already have. And your employees have, in their day-to-day systems, like, if you use any of the sort of social media things, if you use any of like the sort of communication devices, et cetera, all of those have a baked Gen AI in them now, so that they have the access. Now, I think it's just, smart companies that we're working with a lot of times, they're focusing it and almost sort of taking their staff, because not everyone is digital native, right? It's a big, wide world of different ages, backgrounds, et cetera, out there, and lots of intelligence can sit across that. So I think a lot of companies are almost saying, we think that you can use Gen AI in this place, right? Do your first draft here, right? Or the classic way is now like almost embedded into your emails. Like, if you're like a sales role, communication role, have Gen AI test the tone of your emails, et cetera. So I think the horse is already out, right? The Gen AI is out there, right? Whether you're providing it as a company or not, it's on their phone. I think the smarter companies are actually sort of putting up those guidelines, putting up those use cases, and saying, well, like, here's a place where it could get you information very quickly, or it could start your thought process very quickly.
And it does not necessarily mean that you will have access to the personal data, right? There are some restrictions, and also, even if we are talking about generative AI, this is still technology. We can set some boundaries beyond which the data will not flow. So even if some questions would be raised by the employees, simply the response would not be generated. So as Craig is saying, we have to get used to using generative AI. We have to think how to make things simpler, and how we can get the benefit of having such an intelligent tool and access to all the data in our hands, but in a smart way.
Yeah, and being realistic about it, because you have a policy about, hey, don't use ChatGPT or whatever AI in this. These policies have no teeth. Like, people in a pinch will do what they need to do. So it's kind of like, stop, or I'll say stop again. I think you just have to be I think good information and good guidelines and sort of harnessing that, as opposed to trying to just ignore it, is a good way forward.
And then this democratization, of contracting. Talk a little bit about some of your insight into how do you take a look at some more self-service and ability for teams to be able to do a little more on their own and less from the legal standpoint, and guardrails there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so like, I think this is going to be controversial. I'm a lawyer, so I could say it, but as much as it pains me, non-lawyers can read and write as well. I think we have to sort of embrace the fact that actually, lawyers have a very important job in contracting and do a good part of it, like in terms of making it, enforceable, compliant, and just sensible in a lot of ways. But these are business documents. These are business relationship documents. I think realizing this, a lot of companies have gone to this, whether it is more of the self-service or pulling down templates, et cetera. I think that's where you're seeing everyone, I think, comes to us, right, Radek? I think everyone's like, oh, can you simplify my template? Can I have other people use it? Can my CLM have all my sales team access these things? Now, the smart companies also too put guardrails up on this. Like, I have two 14-year-old boys. I don't ever ask an open-ended question. Hey, what do you want to do? It's more like, oh, would you like to go out for hot dogs, or you want to go for pizza? Right. I think that's what the smart companies are doing. They put those guidelines in the systems where the contracting exists, so that way you can do self-serve and you can do these things without burning your fingers.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we can also limit the input data, right? If we know that our certain templates are good, we know what is our negotiation strategy, and the procedure sitting behind is clear. Why not use generative AI to prepare the first draft of your contract? It will be based on your documents. It will be pre-approved and in line with your procedure. The same applies to, I don't know, contract summaries. We are not asking someone to go beyond the content that is in there. It's still your data, so just being smart with for what you will use the generative AI can make things simpler, simply, and safer.
And democratic.
And democratic, yes.
Another group of questions, one from Ricard, and I saw a similar one around cost of GenAI, and also justifying that, or having conversations up the ladder about what you're doing, what the cost is, and how you're going to justify that. I'm assuming that is a lot around what we talked earlier: less efficiency, less and more in the revenue generation, the compliance, and the obligation management side. Any thoughts about cost versus benefit, and how you talk up the ladder to get your funding for your CM?
I mean, I think it's I'll use the American term, green dollar savings, right? Like, I think the idea that that this will make people's lives easier, the company, is this a cool tool? That's a very pre-2020 idea of a business case. I think now the business case has to be very tied to, all right, we're going to use GenAI in XYZ form. This will help us then to make contracts faster, and faster means more revenue in. So make do the cash cash in hand type argument. There's other things about, well, we have revenue leakage. We have 10,000 suppliers. Contracts are very complicated. We can't hire a staff of 500 people to be reading all these contracts, but GenAI could help 5 people, stop this revenue leakage. Like, we've done studies with the World CC. The latest number is 8.6% of annual contract value is lost through poor contract management. Look it up. And I think actually, tying your business case or tying your use case to like really solving business problems is always works, right, Radek?
And it's not just about the revenue leakage, but also your relationships that you're having with your vendors, which you're having with your customers. All the data that you already have in your organization can help you design the new strategy, identify the proper performance points for next discussions, make the proper decision-making process, if we should consolidate vendors, if we should change the customer base, maybe we should search for alternative options for delivering our service. Those are all the areas where actually generative AI can help you in a blink of an eye, pulling all the data that you are requesting for this type of analysis, and probably will take people several hours just to find them.
Yeah, quantification is important.
Yeah. Yes.
I think another one we're seeing is as clients adopt our technology, they're doing it in phases. So they're ensuring that they don't do the organization, that they're making progress towards a goal versus some one-stop journey. Any thoughts about stages in a project, and how you continue to trust and belief one is going to deliver a positive outcome?
Yeah, so definitely the phased approach, just like with any other technology, right? So we're starting with pilot, selecting a single use case or department in which you would like to implement this technology, picking up the use case as well, like automating legal clause generation, preparing contract summaries, standardizing the templates. This minimizes the risk of disrupting the overall organization. Then the iterative rollout. So based on this example, you can see what are the priority regions or business units in you have the highest readiness for this type of activity or the most significant ROI potentially. And then with this iterative rollout, you can determine how far you would like to go within your organization with the new technology.
Yeah, and I think you guys are doing a good job about this. It sort of makes it plays to that. Like 10 years ago, you'd see a lot like, oh, we're going to plan like the CLM is going to go in this marching order of we're going to this country, then this process, and this and this and this, and there's no sort of built-in time of reflection. So you see right now a lot more MVPs, minimal viable product. Test it out, reflect, and see. Let's use the agile, project management in our CLMs as well, because look, what works in the US probably may not work in France or vice versa, right? So you may need to have to tweak things, and you may start actually discovering whether it's adoption issues, template issues, or just rationalization issues. I can tell you most likely the ones you're going to run into, but you're not going to believe it until you see it. So I think sometimes having that sort of flexible way of going through that and saying, oh yeah, okay, now that's why that didn't work. Let's try this.
And if we can think about how we would implement that in the organization that already has the CLM. Well, from my perspective, the question here is about the APIs and connectors that already exist. So actually, the integration should be seamless. And also, the generative AI should rather complement rather than disrupt the existing workflows, just by embedding additional capabilities directly into the similar interface and not disrupt that user journey, because otherwise we will face issues with the adoption, and no one wants that.
Sorry, go ahead, Craig.
You don't want that, Troy.
We also see some larger global organizations struggle a little bit with multiple systems, multiple processes. Oftentimes a department might have a legacy tool. They're adopting Ironclad as a more modern tool. Any thoughts around that journey for those larger organizations, those global organizations, and how they rationalize and then maybe put together a 3 or 5 year horizon or roadmap?
Yeah, it's like most large companies, right? We all like to think that we're as companies that we're run like China, one decision from the center that everyone follows. But most big multinationals, right, are more like the EU, one set of ideas at the center that then go out and get enacted 27 different ways. So I think it's just being realistic about this, but also understand what's the problem I'm trying to solve, right? Now, maybe it's a legacy system, maybe it's not the coolest thing, it doesn't do everything, but does it work? Is it actually getting what you need to? So maybe so let's prioritize the things that we have to get going quickly. And, and maybe just do that change management journey along the way of saying, well, look, maybe they have I've seen companies with 9 CLMs, which is baffling in its own way. I'm sure all 9 of those companies sold the idea that they're going to have one source of truth. Anyway, what usually happens is I think the journey is prioritize the problem you're trying to solve, go in it that way, and then if something, hey, maybe it doesn't look right, but it's actually not, it's innocuous, it's not really causing any damage, don't go after that right now, right? This goes back to the speed and value and all ideas we talked about at the beginning. Focus on the actual problem you're trying to solve, and maybe that's the one where you have to rip out old tools or add a new tool to. But hey, legacy systems, sometimes they're okay to lay around for a while.
Yeah, and I think that we are here going. If we are having multiple systems and we would like to treat them as a data lake for machine learning or generative AI to help us find the standards, the patterns, identify those across different systems, well, we need to make some effort to do that. And I think that at this stage, this is what the organizations are doing. They are ready to embed GenAI into the existing technology estate. Probably after 5 to 6 years, we'll think about it differently, how we can set the data around generative AI and actually change the perception 180 degrees. Instead of trying to accommodate generative AI in the current technology, what other technology do we need to make generative AI work?
That's probably a good segue to Cameron had a question around, your company data and repositories. Any thoughts around repositories, your own company data, and how you apply GenAI to that, and how critical that is to your transformation?
That's such a Cameron question. No, that's a good question, Cameron. I mean, I think, look, going back to like your own data, right? I think, well, first of all, make sure your data is correct. And that's the thing I think that, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of companies
Yeah.
kind of miss that trick, right? Yeah, because if you don't have one source of truth and the information's all over the place anyway, guess what? The Gen AI is not going to be that smart. If it's only looking at one half of a story and have everything in the right place, then you got to do a little bit of homework to make the Gen AI really intelligent. So I think getting that data cleansing in the first part, or as the kids used to say back in the 90s, master data management. If you get that set up correctly, then you can actually use the Gen AI in the thing. I'm not sure, is that, I'm trying to make sure the question
I
there.
second that because, well, this is the proper approach, and with all the data that that are sitting in your organization, I think that this is where the value is, and applying generative AI technology into that actually can support your decision-making process, can identify your negotiation patterns, can help you set up the strategies for your negotiations, or just outline the strategy for the next 5 years for your organization. This is where all the data will support that, but it needs to be accurate.
Yes.
Otherwise, you may make some mistakes. And again, we wouldn't like to do that.
Yeah. Mistakes are very costly in 2025.
Yeah, they are. This notion around collaboration that you have on the slide there, and finding experts and what have you. I mean, of course, we would love everyone to partner with Ironclad. We would love everyone to partner with Deloitte. Thoughts on finding some partners that will help you, and how you go about bringing outside talent into your project to make sure you're leveraging that expertise.
I think, to me, I think it's always asking, like, when you talk to someone, right, are they trying to sell you the pencil, or are they asking you what your problem is, right? Like, if they're coming with a preset, like, oh, this is the absolute solution, it's going to work every single time, I think that's an old way of doing it. I think more where you see whether it's, your vendors such as you guys, right, or your consultants or whoever, can they listen? Are they actually asking questions around value? Are they asking questions about, like, hey, what are your actual goals this year? Not like buying a CLM is not a goal for a year, right? The goal you actually have for the year is, I want to have faster contracting. I need to take cost out, or I need to have, speedier time to sales or something. That's the actual goal, right? The CLM is just a piece of that. So I think just like someone who could help you sort of unearth and talk to, well, what's the business problem you're trying to solve, right? I think you guys do a good job of that. Troy, you and I talked, right? Yeah. Like, asking like those questions, like, well, what is it you're really looking for? Because like, I think sometimes, a lot where I see CLM or any kind of technology this go wrong is, like, they think that's the end goal, just to get the thing and put the thing in. But there's something that's driving that decision.
There are also different types of generative AI, and they are good at different things. Just like Craig said, the question is, what is the ultimate goal of your organization? What is the problem that you would like to fix? Which part of the process you would like to digitize, leveraging generative AI? And then having these discussions, understanding what is the optimal model for you would probably drive the best results for you. There's not something like one generative AI will fit and fix all the mistakes that you may make. There are certain decisions that would have to be made.
That's great. There was a question that came in from Jenny around confidentiality. How do you deal with Gen AI applied to that, and confidentiality in general? Any thoughts navigating that?
I'm sorry, I can't share that answer. No. I think, well, again, the confidentiality, right? It's just making sure that it's going to be boring stuff. This is like access rights.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, like, if you're working for like Department of Defense, right, or your suppliers are sorry, like, you're not going to be you're using Gen AI very differently than if you're selling toasters. So I think it's just understand, like, like, I think that's like the EU AI Act is coming out about, like, how are you going to be using the Gen AI? Like, and you can't use it to like look at like people's salaries or rate individuals. It has to be rated by actual people, not just computers. So I think a lot of that stuff is whether it's the confidentiality piece of it is just it's just being smart about it, right? Who not just who can use the Gen AI, but if it's just your employees in a place, they're bound by your confidentiality rules anyway. It's what you're broadcasting out there. So just being like like we're saying, like when you're solutioning this, like saying, okay, well, what's the use case? Don't let people just use it willy-nilly, right? Say, what's the thing we want our people to be using Gen AI on, and then just like play that out. Like, well, what's the information? Where are they going to get the information from? All right, our own contracts. All right, what are they going to do with it? Whether they're going to send it, who they're going to send it to? Are they sending it just within here? Or are they sending it to someone else? Or they may send it to someone else. Okay, then we have to redact or make sure that there's an extra check on this information because we can't be sending personally identifiable information from the EU to the US, et cetera. Like, so it's just playing it out, right? I think that's where you have to go. That's the exercise, right?
Yeah, I totally second Craig. And as we mentioned before, we can adjust the requirements of the generative AI to the organizational boundaries. This is not that we have to share all the information that are within your company with all the people who have access to the tool. There are certain ways of protecting sensitive information and coding that in the tool as well.
And Jenny asked another question around model training. Are there times where you want to turn off or restrict information from or contracts from being put into the model for training that model?
Well, I mean, I think you want, you're asking my lawyer brain on hypotheticals. Yeah, so I think you could, right? So if you want to be training it to do redlining, which is the thing everyone wants to try to do, you want to have the best red lines, right? You want to have the most sensible ones. So you'd want to train it on what your best commercial people, procurement people, lawyers, et cetera, have done. So you want to feed it intelligence, right? You don't want to, if you feed it garbage, it's just going to emulate garbage, right? Bad markups, too much redlining. So like if you're in a sales environment, oftentimes people are graded on how much redlining they do. So you want to almost train the machine, right, to be smart enough to all right, only make changes, the minimal amount. Don't do stylistic changes, just do substantive changes. So I think it's you gotta be clever about when you're model training or prompt training, etc. That's why I mean it's a good point because if you just say all right, pick out the standard contracts. Well, what if for 10 years you were losing money? Right? And you had no 4X clauses, you had no COLA increases and all sorts of things. I don't want to train the robot to be like that. That was a bad year. The CEO got fired. Right? So pick the ones that came to a good conclusion and then train the machine on that.
Yeah. Data quality relative approach. Pick the best contract, start with a smaller sample, so some of the provisions, not the whole contract. See the result. If that improves, let's move to the next part. Let's add a little bit of something more complex. If you're satisfied, let's move forward. Yeah, those are the principles, I guess.
Yeah, there's a reason why law school is 3 years in the United States. They don't just you don't just come in the first day and say, here's all the law. Learn it. You build up on it.
One more question around the future thoughts. How can the leaders on the call be thinking about building that future-ready workforce in this new evolving landscape of Gen AI and centers of excellence and et cetera?
Yeah, so I think it's that's a $10,000 question there. But I think you have to really. Things are going to keep changing. So I go back to our original points. There's added complexity, a focus on value, and change is going to be a constant. So I think that having those as sort of your North Star, thinking about those as you go into well, look, I need to professionalize this activity. Doing contracts, side of desk or otherwise, kind of works for this size of a company, but it's not going to work now. And the words supply chain or other things affecting your supply chain come up a lot right now. So I think just having that mindset of saying, look, oh, wait, I can't wait until this is over. After this is over, something else is going to happen. All right. So you don't know what that is. So having that sort of like realizing I'm going to need to be reactive. I'm going to need to be like sort of, I always got to react to the change, but I need to be always prepared to be able to react to the change. I think that's something that in your sort of design thinking about this, that's able, well, I need to professionalize this. I need some tools. I need some people. I need to do this in the right way. That kind of, you're already half there. But that's just picking like locations and where and how you do it. I mean, right?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that the next level is people that are more open-minded, that are technology savvy, that used to use technology in their day-to-day activities, and are raising questions why we are doing things in a certain way. Can we do it differently? So less maybe specialized in certain area, rather having broader knowledge how we can leverage the technology to help us in day-to-day activities. And then, of course, just happy to test that as well and bring to life, focusing on execution.
Great. Well, Craig and Radek, just a really great conversation. As you can see, there is a QR code there for you to download the thought leadership piece, which I thought was a fantastic thought piece. Would love for the organizations to learn more about Deloitte, their Center of Excellence technology, and their legal practice. Would also love for the organizations out there to learn a little bit more about Ironclad and what we can do for your Center of Excellence and your contracting journey. Craig, any parting thoughts about next steps for the folks on the call?
Definitely test your Wi-Fi before you get into the webinar. I learned that one today. No, but look, hopefully this is entertaining. Hopefully this gives you some ideas out there. I think, I made some jokes about, but these are really good questions. I'm glad that we're having this discussion about that. Thanks to everyone for participating in this. I think just, like Radek said, I think being open-minded, thinking of the future, I think is key to this, and don't get tied up, right? And fail fast and pivot after that.
Great. Radek, anything from you?
Don't be afraid to try. The change is coming anyway, so instead of just being in the back there, we can be the first one in the trailblazers. Let's test the new approaches, let's test the new technology. Let's think how we can make our life easier, simply.
Well, Craig and Radek, thanks for the partnership. Also, thanks for the friendship. We just really value the relationship we have with Deloitte. And for everyone on the call, we really appreciate you taking the time. Sorry for the technology difficulties in the beginning, but hopefully we added some value to your day. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great one.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Troy. Bye. Thanks, everyone.